Daniel Cornelius Robinson disappeared June 23, 2021 near Buckeye, Arizona. The hydrogeologist Daniel Robinson was last seen by a fellow worker and pump technician, Ken Elliott, whilst assessing a remote drill site in the Arizona desert on June 23, 2021, around 9:15 and 9:30 a.m. It was located near Buckeye in Arizona near Sun Valley Parkway and Cactus Road, and it was Daniel's second job of the day. Soon after, he drove off into the desert and has not been seen since. His Jeep turned up around a month later containing his belongings, including his clothes, in an area previously searched, and one of his boots was lodged under his vehicle. Investigations are ongoing to try and locate Robinson, but the family and a private investigator believe there are troubling aspects to this case. Was it a suicide, foul play, or misadventure in the Arizona desert? The search for Daniel continues. Robinson, 24, the youngest of 4 children, grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. He was a keen outdoorsman, musician, and traveler who was always close with his family and remained in constant contact with his parents and siblings. He graduated from the College of Charleston in 2019 with a major in archaeology. He then attended a course in Tucson and soon after was offered a job by the engineering firm Matrix New World. He was described as a 5'8" African-American man weighing 165 pounds with black hair and brown eyes. Part of his right forearm and hand were missing as a result of a birth defect. Ken Elliott said Daniel was initially fine as they discussed the weather and the job. It was an abnormally cool day for the area, and Ken had never met Robinson before, and they were to work on a deep well together. But within a short period, Robinson became distracted. Elliott said, quote, "He was just looking off into the desert. He had a very, very distant look in his eyes. Whenever he'd turn around again, I would look at him and look into his eyes. The first thing I thought was maybe he was on drugs or something, but his pupils were not dilated. From that standpoint, everything appeared to be normal. Then I thought this was a medical condition or something. I wasn't too sure. I kept watching him, but he just kept turning around and looking off into the desert. Then he just turned around and walked back over to his Jeep, and I just assumed he was going to get something out of his vehicle. And he opened the door, we got in, sat down, put on his seatbelt. Then he looked at me and just waved at me and backed up and took off," end quote. At that point, Robinson drove off in his blue Jeep Renegade. Elliott told his co-workers by phone about what had happened, assuming that Daniel wasn't feeling well and would call in sick. However, no one heard from Daniel after that. He was reported missing to Buckeye police the same day. Elliott later followed Daniel's Jeep tire tracks in the rain-soaked dirt road and found that instead of going left at the T-junction to return to Phoenix, Robinson turned right, deeper into the Sonoran Desert. The search was led by the Buckeye Police Department using UTVs, cadaver dogs, searchers on foot, and drones flying overhead, along with assistance in the air from Phoenix Firebird helicopters and Civil Air Patrol. While Tempe police were dispatched to check Robinson's apartment on June 24th, they did not go inside. Police did not actually enter Robinson's home until July 7th, nearly 2 weeks after he was reported missing. Civil Air Patrol, which is comprised of volunteers who do air searches, was not contacted by police until July 7th. Family members traveled from the East Coast to Arizona to join the search, which covered an area of 70 square miles. Detectives said they obtained a ping from Daniel's phone, but were unable to track it due to the phone being off or out of range. After obtaining his call records, they learned that he had not made any calls or texts after leaving the job site. BPD detectives, along with Daniel's family, worked to obtain phone and financial information, but did not locate any information which would aid in locating him. His family, friends, and co-workers said that in the days prior to his disappearance, he was not like himself, but said, quote, there was no indication that he wished to harm himself or leave the area, end quote. Several mine shafts were searched in the area, but there was no sign of Daniel. Finally, on July 19, 2021, almost a month after Daniel's disappearance, a rancher called Brandon Shelton found his 2017 Jeep Renegade with license plate LNA2CMA in a ravine. It was just 4 miles from the work site where he was last seen, but Daniel was not at the scene. The Jeep had landed on its side with significant damage. Police said a seatbelt had been worn at the time, and the airbags were found deployed. One of Robinson's size 11 Red Wing work boots was stuck under the truck. Shelton, whose cattle graze 14,000 acres in the Buckeye area, is convinced the car had only been in the ravine that leads to the Hassayampa River a short while when he came across it, saying, quote, it was clean and my cows would have found it. Cows are inquisitive creatures and would have licked it, end quote. The Jeep was found in the area that had already been searched, with police saying, quote, because of the rough terrain, the vehicle was not clearly visible to the crew searching by air and foot, end quote. The vehicle contained Robinson's clothes, phone, wallet and keys, and bottled water. A t-shirt, jeans turned inside out, shorts, orange work vest, boots, and 2 mismatched black socks were all located. One of the socks was Nike and the other Adidas. The ravine was searched on the ground by foot and in the air by the Department of Public Safety Ranger helicopters, but they found no trace of Robinson. There was no blood found in the car, and there were no indications of foul play. On July 31st, a human skull was found, but further investigations proved it was not Robinson, and its identity remains unknown. Other remains recovered during searches were determined to be animal bones. The family hired a private investigator around the end of July. The former police officer Jeff McGrath, who specialized in accident investigations. Based on GPS data, he discovered that the Jeep had got into multiple accidents after Daniel's disappearance, but before it fell down the ravine. Evidence from the vehicle showed that it crashed. The airbags deployed, then drove another 11 miles and was involved in another crash. The first collision was 4 hours after Daniel went missing, while there was also some, quote, paint transfer, end quote, from the vehicle. After that first accident, it's unknown where the vehicle was taken next. McGrath said that after the airbags were deployed, the ignition was turned on at least 46 more times during the extra 11 miles driven. Investigators believe that something triggered Robinson into going into the desert, where he stripped off and wandered away from his car. Jeff McGrath said that the theory made no sense. Quote, if you were delirious and ripped off all your clothes and wandered into the desert, you wouldn't stick one of your shoes under the car. My personal theory is that someone deliberately wrecked that car out there, end quote. McGrath believes that Robinson was upset about the rejection of a woman and went on an all-night video game binge. A Buckeye police report states that Daniel met a woman named Caitlin while he was making deliveries for Instacraft and dropped off an order at her home. Caitlin said she and her friend were drunk and invited Robinson inside, and they later exchanged numbers. Within a week, he arrived at her house unannounced and began sending her texts saying, quote, I couldn't stop thinking about you, and I love you, end quote. She tried to rebuff him, quote, honestly, you showing up at my house unannounced made me extremely uncomfortable. I don't see us hanging out anytime soon, end quote. The next day, he turned up at her house again. Quote, do you hate me? End quote. Daniel replied. Quote, I don't hate you, but please leave me alone, end quote. Caitlin texts back. He took 15 hours to respond within his final text. 18 hours after that, he disappeared. McGrath said of the events after he drove off, quote, at that point I think somebody, not a good person, found him. I can't imagine what they did with him, but I believe his vehicle was crashed a couple of times, and then its final rest was at the bottom of that ravine." End quote. McGrath found another black Nike sock 3 miles away in the desert. He cannot explain it, but it is another reason he believes there is more to the case than meets the eye. McGrath and Daniel's family believe Buckeye police did not carry out a thorough investigation into Robinson's mysterious disappearance. They pointed out that Daniel's clothes, possessions, and car were handed over to his father as soon as he arrived in Arizona from South Carolina. Robinson's brother, Roger Cawley Robinson, believes police are doing what they can to find him now, but he fears it's too little too late. Quote, "Had they been quick about it in the beginning, we wouldn't be here 3 months later still searching for my brother and still looking for answers." End quote.